Hello there guys, I'm Unstable Voltage and today I'm going to be taking a look at an early access title by the name of Prison Architect. Now you may have heard of Prison Architect because it's been in early access for a little while now, and it was originally a crowd-funded game, and it's pretty much an example of crowdfunding or early access done right. This game has been a shining beacon amongst some of the early access titles that have been appearing as of late. So, a little bit of background. About 20 years ago, a little company called Bullfrog produced a game by the name of Theme Park. And that was one of the games that defined my childhood. I lost hundreds of hours to that game. I loved theme parks as a concept, and the ability to have a game where you could build and design and manage your own theme park was absolutely wonderful. Move the clock forward about 4 years, and the same company developed another title by the name of Theme Hospital. This time around you have limited resources, limited cash, and a limited amount of space to build and manage your own hospital in order to deal with all of the illnesses, ailments and injuries of the local populace. And that actually took the simulation to a bit more of a detailed level. It went away from placing big prefabricated rides in an open field and connecting them up with snaking little paths, down to the level where you could actually build buildings, walls, put furniture in and create individual little offices. Now, that was a long time ago. They don't really make games like that anymore. And there've certainly been some pretenders out there, but none of them have ever really come close to the mark. And almost 20 years later on, Introversion comes along. And they produce Prison Architect. Now, many of you, if you've already played Prison Architect, are going to notice similarities between that and things like Theme Park and Theme Hospital, because it's a sim game and they're all fairly similar. But I think Prison Architect has got the formula just right. Now, I'm no stranger to covering games in early access, but I'll admit most games I'll cover in early access even when they are very, very young, in the very, very early stages of their development. I actually wanted to wait with Prison Architect. I didn't want to actually get into this game before it was ready, before it was finished, because I didn't want to disillusion myself with a game that might be buggy or broken or very feature incomplete. Now, it's taken me a little while to get on board with Prison Architect, and now I finally have. And even though the game hasn't released yet, and there are still a few little bugs and optimizations and things that need sorting out, I'm happy to say that the game is, for the most part, mechanically complete. It's very, very stable, it works very well, there's a lot of content in there. It is mostly sandbox, but you can still easily lose hundreds of hours to this game. So let's go in a little bit closer and take a look and actually see what we've got here. As you can see, this is my entire prison. Now, it looks quite small, and in fact it probably is. That we can actually buy some additional area to the sides here, so we could actually extend the prison out if we wanted to. But when you start a new prison, you actually start with a plot of land that is the size you see here on the screen. Now, you might think, well, I can't really see what's going on. Well, that's because I'm zoomed right out. If I actually take the camera in, you can actually see there's a very good level of zoom on this game. You can actually zoom this far in, which is very, very close. You will see, of course, some of the textures do look a little bit low resolution when you zoom this far in. I don't think there's ever a reason to want to be zoomed this far in. And you will also notice, of course, there's a few minor little glitches, like you sometimes see where the sprite sheets have been cut up. There's a couple of little extra lines and things on some of the sprites, but that's fine. If we sort of zoom out to this level, everything looks good. Now, some people have criticised the graphics style, saying that it's very simplistic and it's very basic, but bear in mind here, we are working with a relatively small team on a crowd-sourced project, and not everyone has the ability, resources, expertise or money to be able to make 3D assets and, you know, high-resolution textures. So I think the graphics style for this game actually works very, very well. It's simplistic and it's stylized. It's easy enough to tell what's going on. You can tell at a glance the difference between officers, armed guards, workmen, janitors, cooks, prisoners, who all have different coloured uniforms, of course, depending on the level of security they have. Like this little guy down here actually has a grey uniform because he's classed as being a low security risk. So what you basically have to do in Prison Architect is you start with a blank canvas, and if I do have one gripe with the game at the moment, that is probably what it is. The game does have a tutorial, which is relatively basic, and it teaches you some of the sort of very basic things that you can build in the basic concepts of the game. But it does that by a little scripted story, which is quite nice. It gives some flavour to the game, and it gives you a series of things that you have to do in a prison that is already mostly complete. So you actually start on that tutorial with a built prison, and all you have to do is do the things that it tells you. And that's fine, but then when you start your first prison and you start with some money in the bank and a completely empty plot of land, it can be very, very daunting and very, very overwhelming. Now, one thing that I do really like in this game that a lot of these building games don't have is it actually has a planning tool. And that planning tool is excellent because it allows you to go ahead and measure out on the map. You can measure out rooms, you can measure out paths, you can work out where you want walls to be and things like that. And none of this is costing anything because I'm not actually building anything here. I'm just laying down a plan on the floor. And I think that's actually a really, really good idea. It's quite possible that other games have done this in the past, but I certainly can't think of any off the top of my head. And the problem that you have in games like this, when you only have a limited amount of space to build, is you'll often build something and then suddenly realise that you haven't utilised the space very well. I mean, I've done that here because you can see that I've got some gaps, but the ability to actually plan things out before you start to build them, to actually be able to count the spaces, to actually be able to work out how much of something you can fit in to any given space before you go ahead and actually start buying the materials to construct said building. It's a really, really great idea, and that's something that I like. But when you first start the game and you do have that blank canvas, it's very, very tempting to suddenly go, right, I'm going to build this big building. So you plan out a big block and then you think, well, I'm going to need a building for this and I'm going to need a room for that. And before you know it, you've already spent your entire budget before you've even built your first cell. So you get money in a couple of different ways in this game. Obviously, as a prison, your job is to house and rehabilitate prisoners, and the prisoners come along every now and then in a little bus that comes down this road here at the side. Now, you can actually adjust the intake of prisoners. You have a little tab down here, and you can change your intake for how many prisoners you want to intake daily. And you can also choose different categories of prisoners, from minimum security, medium and maximum security. There are also some more, such as Supermax, who are the really dangerous ones, and you also have people who are protective custody, such as ex-police officers and snitches, people who are likely to be attacked by other prisoners if they are allowed into the general populace. So you actually get money every day for having the prisoners in the prison, and you also actually get money for taking new prisoners in. If prisoners get released and don't reoffend, you get extra money for that. You can also make money from the prison by doing certain things. I've got some guys down here doing forestry, so I'm literally just using some spare land to grow some trees, and every now and then we cut the trees down and ship them out, and we get some money for that. Later on, you can build things such as workshops, which allow prisoners to make things with the wood from the trees. They can also make license plates, which you can sell for a relatively decent profit. And all of this, of course, has to pay for the construction of the prison itself, along with all of the items therein. You've also got to pay wages for your staff. You've got to pay for things such as research. You also need to pay for supplies, such as uniforms, tasers for your guards, food and stuff like that. So there is quite a bit of budget going on. We can click on the cash flow there, and we can instantly see we've got all these incomes and expenditures here. We've got our prisoner grant, we've got our wages, guard wages, administrator wages, because it's not just about the officers. You also have your admin staff as well. So we have an accountant, we have a psychologist, there's the warden, there's the foreman for the workers, there's the lawyer. There's also a chief somewhere who is off doing something somewhere, no idea what. So there's quite a lot that you can actually do in this game. So what you've basically got to do is you want your prisoners to reform. You want your prisoners to stay safely in the prison, be relatively comfortable, and have all of their needs met. And then ideally, eventually, they will go through parole, get released, and hopefully won't reoffend, which will make you a nice big bonus. So you have to manage things very carefully, because on this game, currently I am actually making a positive cash flow, but it's very, very easy to slip into the negatives and run out of money. And what you often find that you need to do sometimes is just expand the prison. Now, one thing that this game does have that's actually quite hidden, and it isn't mentioned in the tutorial, but it makes a big, big difference to a new player, is you'll actually go into the reports here, and you'll actually find an option called grants. And what grants allows you to do, it gives you a series of little mini missions that you can do within the sandbox game. Such as, for example, building cell block A. So to build cell block A, all it says you have to do is complete a basic detention centre and unlock the finance. To get the cell block A grant, you need to build a basic detention centre and unlock finance. And then you can unlock this grant. When you take the grant, you get a $20,000 advance, and then you get another $20,000 when you complete it. And all you have to do is raise the prisoner capacity to 15. After that, you get more and more, like we've got the basic detention centre here. So we can instantly take a $20,000 advance payment and then get an extra $10,000 for completing it. And all we have to do is build a holding cell, a shower, a yard, a kitchen, a canteen, hire at least 2 guards and 2 cooks. So it's very, very difficult when you come into your first game, and I'll admit the first couple of times I played, I actually had to restart because I planned out my cell block and I was out of money. And I hadn't realised that these grants were here, that you could actually go in and get extra money, which really, really helps with how fast that you can build the prison. So there's quite a lot to do. As you can see, there are various different rooms that you can build. You can build cells for all of your individual prisoners. Now, there are certain prerequisites to how large a cell has to be and certain things that it has to have before it can be considered a cell. So it has to have a bed, it has to have a toilet, it has to be enclosed, and it has to be a certain size. But you can also put extra things in there to make the prisoner's life more comfortable. So you can add things like a television, you can add things like a bookshelf, you can even put a personal shower in there. Now that's all good, but of course it all costs extra money, and it also means that you have to make the cells larger, which takes up more space, but it keeps the prisoners happy. And happy prisoners are much less likely to riot, and they're much more likely to reform and keep their good behaviour once they get out. So it certainly is a lot about managing the space and also managing the finances. You can also, of course, build solitary, which you use for people who are more than a little bit naughty once they're inside your prison. You do find that people will be caught carrying various prohibited items such as weapons, narcotics, luxuries, tools. Bear in mind we've got workmen running around because you're constantly working on the prison, you're constantly building new buildings, and you will find that prisoners will pick up tools that are left unattended. So building a building is as simple as building a foundation, which you can build out of brick or concrete. And you can either build a foundation directly onto open ground, or you can go into the planning tool first and actually plan out where you want your building to be. It looks like we've actually got some old plans here that have been left around that we might want to go ahead and delete, but I think they're all gone now. I think we've cleared them all. You've also got a huge list of materials here, so you can actually put down various different paths. You can put down grass and gravel, you can put down stone, roads, fencing, flooring, various different tiles and different types of walls. You also have the option to remove tunnels, because prisoners, if they find a nice little blind spot where it's not seen by a camera or patrolled by a guard, will try and dig their way out from time to time. You also have to be really careful with the utilities. If I go onto the utilities button here, you can actually see all of the electricity cables and all of the water pipes that run beneath the prison. Now you see water pipes actually come in two varieties. You've got these big thick ones and you've got these little thin ones. Now the idea is you don't want to run these big ones through a cell, because prisoners can actually tunnel into the big water pipes. So most of the time you want to try and make sure that you actually only have the small pipes running beneath the cell and not the big ones, which is quite a clever little idea. So you've got all of these different rooms that you can section off various different parts of your prison. And there's an awful lot that you have to build, particularly early on, which is one of the reasons why it's easy to run out of money. At the very least, you're going to have some cells for your prisoners, and probably at least 1 or 2 solitary rooms. You also really need to have at least 1 kitchen and 1 canteen, because you need somewhere to be able to feed your prisoners. You're going to have a yard, because you need somewhere for your prisoners to exercise. And you soon start to find that you are constantly having to add more and more buildings to your prison. There's no real way to keep it small. You do have to continue to expand and add the new features as time goes on. So we've got a reception for greeting new prisoners. We've got an armory, which allows us to have armed guards, and we can actually go ahead and also roll out tasers to our normal prison officers as well. We've got a classroom which we can use for training our staff, but also teaching things to new prisoners, because there are actually various different programs that we can run, such as kitchen and hygiene safety, the foundational education program, general education qualification. So things like that you can run in a classroom. We've also got things like behavioural therapy, which will take place in the psychologist's office. We've also got things like alcoholics group therapy, which we can use in our common room, which the prisoners can also use in their free time for relaxing and unwinding. And we've got things like the Treatment of Drugs Act, which will take place in things like the infirmary. We've also got a morgue here, because you can get prisoners and officers can die within this game. You will find that some prisoners will actually attack each other, and sometimes you will have a prisoner set something on fire, and you can die in the fires as well, so you do have to be careful. Then you've got things like cleaning cupboards, laundry rooms, the parole room, you've got showered areas, so there's an awful lot of stuff going on. You've got a huge list of objects, and this isn't even the complete list. If I go and click the little plus button down here, this is the current list of objects that are in the game. And they're not finished yet, they are still adding a few more things, although most of the things that you're going to need are all here, which is actually quite nice. So that's the list of objects. Then you can hire all of your staff. You can actually set deployment, so you can say if you want a guard to be in a specific room at all times, you can actually set somebody to be in there. You can also set things like patrols for various different types of guards. We haven't got any dog patrols at the moment. You can also zone off different areas and say, well, we want this cell block to be max security only, or we want this cell block to be protected custody only, just so you can try and segregate certain prisoners from one another. We've also got the logistics, which allows us to see which cells our kitchens are supplying and which cells our laundry is supplying and things like that. You also have this intelligence section, which allows you to see where various things have been spotted in the past and what potential risks there are. So, for example, if we look at the infirmary has needles, it has poisons, medicines and scissors. There's poisons and potential clubs that can be found in the cleaning cupboard. If we go and look where all of the guards are over here in the security office, there's batons, there's jail keys, cigarettes and lighters. And if we actually go and look in the offices are a completely full of all of these little luxuries that prisoners will try and get a hold of. And then, of course, let's not forget things like the canteen and the kitchen, where there's going to be cutlery around. And that's one of the reasons why you generally tend to go ahead and build metal detectors everywhere, just so you can catch people trying to sneak this sort of stuff out. You do have the option to recruit informants. Normally, informants are people who you've locked away in solitary confinement for some reason, and you can actually convince them to become an informant. What you can do then is you can go and find one of them, and you can actually go and set them to active, and they will go off and sort of snitch on your other prisoners. You do have to be careful with this, though, because they do actually gain suspicion as time goes on. And if the other prisoners become too suspicious of them, they will become a snitch. And if that happens, there's a very good chance that the other prisoners might actually fight against them. You've also got these emergencies buttons, which you can actually use to call in fighter fires, riot police or paramedics, just in case it really does hit the fan within your prison and you need to go and sort that out. And there's also a handy cloning tool, which you can use if you want to copy and paste something you've already built, particularly useful if you're doing things like these cells here. Now, there are a few little bugbears I do have with the game. The clone tool, for example, will only let you do, I think, a maximum of a 12 by 12 section of the prison. And sometimes it doesn't copy things you'd expect it to. Like, for example, you can copy the prison, including the position of the toilet and the shower head, but it won't automatically copy the utility pipes and the cables that are beneath it. But it does automatically copy the lights. So if you've got a prison cell with a light in and you copy that, it will also copy the light, it will clone the light. But whenever you build a new building, when you place a foundation, it places lights in it by default. So what you end up with is you end up doubling up on lights, because you put in you clone in a room and you get the cloned light plus the original light that was in the building when you put the foundation down. So there are a few little quirks that do need ironing out, and I've got every confidence that Introversion will actually get all of this sorted before the game's final release. It's nothing game-breaking, it's just a minor little annoyance, but I'm sure that it will be sorted out. The AI is actually quite good. The scripting works really, really well. As you can see, there's a guy there that's just gone through the metal detector and set it off. Instantly, he paused while a police officer came off his patrol route to search him, and he's just checking to see why he set the metal detector off. And we've got all of our staff working here in the kitchen. We have got a couple of prisoners working as well, because you can actually assign prisoners to do various jobs around the prison, and that's providing, of course, that they pass the appropriate training, which you can set in the programs here. There's a few other things in here that we can look at, so we can see how many staff we've got. Now, staff do have a sort of an energy level, and eventually they become tired, like the doctor has here, and they need to go and rest. When they need to go and rest, they will generally go and chill over here in the staff room. Now, one problem you do tend to get a little bit is pathfinding. Certainly because with a prison, of course, you want it to have as few entrances and exits as possible, and in fact, my entire prison here is completely self-contained. There's actually only 2 ways in and out. There is the gate here at the front, which is double gated, so it's a bit of an airlock, and there's a metal detector. There is a guard stationed here at all time, because these doors need a guard to unlock them, so it's very, very difficult for someone to escape. There's also a room here, which is the visitors' room, and I had to do it this way just to let visitors in from outside, because it did seem to be bugging out a little bit. But again, we've got the same sort of principle here. We have one guard stationed here at all times. He will open and close the doors, and this is where prisoners come in to visit members of their family. Obviously, it now means any prisoners in here only have one door between them and freedom, but so far I haven't had anybody escape. And yes, escape attempts do exist in this game. You can go ahead and speed things up. You can actually pause the game completely if you want to take some time planning something out, or you can actually speed the game up to quite a rapid pace. And I haven't really noticed any performance issues, even with the game zoomed right out. Saying that, this isn't anywhere near the biggest prison that you can have, and it's quite possible that if you do have a much larger prison populated by a larger number of inmates and staff, that it may actually slow the simulation down. But so far, I haven't had any performance issues with it at all, as somebody walks through a metal detector, is found carrying a hammer, and gets shackled and escorted to solitary. So I was mentioning about the pathfinding, and one of the things that this is the big problem for is if you're trying to build something. Say I want to build a building out here on the outside of the prison. What you will find is my workmen will come all the way through the prison. They'll have to wait for the doors to be opened by the guard, like this guy here. So he's tired. He wants to go to the staff room. He had to wait there for this guard to go and open 2 doors. He's not actually going to the staff room. He's going in here. He's probably going to pick something up. But what you might find is that by the time a workman has made his way all the way around the edge of the prison to go to the place where he needs to build something, he's run out of energy and he's tired, which means he will walk all the way back, go to the staff room, have a little bit of a rest, and then he'll go all the way back out and repeat the process again. So maybe that's partly my own fault due to bad planning and not leaving enough sort of through routes for members of staff to be able to get around the prison quite quickly. It does apply to prisoners as well, of course. If you've done what I've done here and you've only got 1 yard right at the bottom of the prison and you've got a cell block right up here at the top of the prison, if you only assign 2 hours of yard time, 2 hours passes quite quickly in the game. And the length of time it might take a prisoner to get from this cell right up here in the north block to path all the way around here and out and back down through the 2 shower blocks to get out into the yard, 1 of the 2 hours may have already passed by that time. So it's not the best planning on my part, and to be fair, what you're looking at here is actually my first attempt at a prison, or at least my first attempt at a prison that I didn't have to cancel and restart because I'd spent all of my money before I actually got anything going. So you get some useful information going on up here in the top left hand corner as well. It just basically tells you things that are going on in the prison over the course of the next few days. If we go ahead and click over here, we've got our bureaucracy menu. Now this is basically the research tree for the game, and as you can see already on my first prison, I've pretty much got everything unlocked. There are a few little bits and pieces down here on legal that I haven't unlocked, but this is essentially how you research anything in the game. So everything has a prerequisite. In order to unlock tax relief, we need to have finance. In order to have finance, we need to have a warden. So you start by researching a warden, you hire a warden. Once you get the warden, you can then research all of the things directly connected to him with these red lines. So we've researched finance and we've hired an accountant. So now, if we want to get tax relief, we can go ahead and click on it. So what you can see that's done now, that will have cost us $10,000, and it's going to take 47 hours, or 48 hours of game time to complete. And that's basically the way research works. You just click on a research and wait for it to finish. So the researching element of the game isn't particularly in depth. The research tree isn't particularly big either, and it doesn't take a long time to be able to research absolutely everything and unlock everything in the actual game. Of course, the game is still in development, and there is a possibility that more stuff will get added before it actually releases. You also get graded on how well your paroled prisoners do, whether or not they actually reoffend. And as you can see, things here have actually been going quite well for me. My prison's worth a fairly decent amount of money. We are making some profits. We haven't had any deaths in custody. We haven't had any prisoners escape. And I've actually had 7 prisoners paroled early. And it doesn't look like any of them have reoffended either. We haven't executed any prisoners because we don't have a execution chamber. We don't have a death row here. So there's a lot of stuff that you can actually do in this game. You can set your armed guards onto free fire. I mean, normally, if there's a bit of a riot going on, your armed guards will try and tase people first, but they will actually shoot them with a shotgun if things need be. You've got various other options you can do, such as locking people up. We can also go and do something like a shakedown, which will make all of our officers go around and basically search all of the prisoners and search all of the cells and see if we can actually find anything. It does remind me that I've still got that informant. No, he is finished. Good. Hopefully he won't get caught as a snitch. So these guys are going to go around now in the middle of the night. The prisoners will get a little bit upset. Now, one good thing with the intelligence as well is each one of these prisoners is actually individually sort of tracked. So you can actually go round to a specific prisoner and you can see if they've got any particular traits. Like this guy is volatile and quick. This guy is strong. Most of these prisoners don't have an awful lot of things attached to them, like this guy who's an instigator. But you will find, particularly if you have prisoners who are max security or super max, that you will get people who are very violent, they're good fighters, they're stoic, and they will cause a lot of problems for you. And that's why you need to keep them away from the general populace. But you can literally track one prisoner, and everyone has an individual name. If I actually mouse over a specific prisoner, it'll tell me information about them. I can actually go ahead and click on them and bring up their individual file. It tells me details about them, such as their family, what they're in for, how long they've got to serve, how long they have already served. And whereas some of the names here are actually provided by Introversion themselves, a lot of the names in this game are also from some of the Kickstarter backers. So some of the names are a little bit strange, and I must admit, I don't know if that's something that's going to be optional, that can be turned on or off in the finished game, but it does break immersion a little bit on certain characters when they do have strange names, particularly if it's a name that doesn't have I mean, James Woods, that's absolutely fine, you know, it's a normal looking name. It also doesn't bother me if they have a nickname like this guy, that's fine. But you will occasionally find some guys who actually have a name that just doesn't look like a real name at all. In fact, if we actually go into our prisoners, we can see them all here. Most of these are probably okay, but you do find the occasional one with a really, really strange name. Luckily now, most of them actually do seem to be fine out of all the ones that I've got in here, so that's not too bad. But you will find some that are a little bit strange. As for the actual assets of the game, like I've said, oh look, we found somebody in here actually trying to tunnel out via the toilet. How amazing is that? So we need to go in here and we need to remove tunnels and get the workmen to go and sort that out. Can't believe that guy actually tried to tunnel out. That's just shows why it's well worth giving these cells a search every now and then. There's only a small pipe in there, so it really was doing a good job to try and do that. But here come the workmen. They're going to go in here. Of course, they do need an officer to come and open the door. I can actually, if I can click on the door, let's just hit tab, I can actually open the door for them. Jail door, I can... let me just lock the door open. That just allows those workmen in. So you do have some direct control because you are overseeing the prison. So you can do certain things such as opening and closing doors and stuff like that. I'll just put this door back to normal. So you can help out a little bit around the prison because sometimes it does take the guards a little bit of time to get stuff done. But so far I haven't had any particular issues with the game, and I've been really enjoying my time with it. There's still quite a lot to do, and I think we will see a lot more added, and wow, somebody has really been digging an epic tunnel here, and I should probably do shakedowns more often. So let us go ahead and remove these tunnels as well. So another little mechanic that this game has, which is actually quite good, is that once you decide you want to build a room or buy some items for a room, those items are purchased and dropped off here in the deliveries, and they eventually get picked up and taken to storage. Then they get picked up by the workmen and taken to the appropriate buildings and placed down. If you dismantle an item, let's say that I want to get rid of this cell and I remove the bookshelf and the bed and the TV and everything, those items will actually get put back into storage. We won't be refunded for them, they just get put into storage. What then happens is if we then build another cell at any point and we need a bed and a bookshelf and a toilet, the workmen will go and grab the ones that are already in storage. So there's some quite nice concepts behind the game. You've also got various different types of doors that respond to different people. So you've got jail doors, small ones and large ones. These doors will only open if they are unlocked by a guard, specifically. You can also open and close them manually, as well as being able to set a specific lock on them, such as saying they should be locked shut or locked open. There are staff doors that can be opened by any member of staff. There are solitary doors that don't open or unlock automatically during the daytime, like jail cell doors do. And then you've got just ordinary doors like this one here that anybody can open if they need to. There's also some other neat stuff that I actually haven't done yet, which I think is under utilities, because you can actually set up things like automated doors. You can put door servos, so you can actually control all of your doors remotely from the security room. You've even got things like CCTV monitors, because your guards can't see everything at once. You've got phone taps, because of course you have a number of phones around the prison, and you want to make sure that none of your prisoners are planning any sort of escape or trying to get people to bring them contraband. This is also the reason why I have this sort of double fence around the outside of the yard. It's not just a place that we can do forestry, it's actually there so that any prisoners in the yard can't get anything thrown to them over the fence, because nobody can get the other side of the fence. So there are a lot of really, really cool mechanics in the game that I like. Going back to what I was saying about assets, the graphics aren't for everybody, but I think they suit the game really, really well. I like them. It's really, really iconic. It's really, really stylized. Nothing is confusing to look at. You can look at most things and tell what they are quite easily. There are a few things that are a little bit tricky. The CCTV cameras are one of them. If we go in and attempt to place a CCTV camera down, you can actually go ahead and rotate these things with the middle mouse button. But as you can see, it's quite difficult sometimes to tell. Left and right's not too bad. That's facing to the left because you can tell by the angle on the left. That's facing to the right. But trying to tell the difference between up and down is often a little bit confusing. So there are a couple of little graphical things that could probably do with a little bit. I suppose if you zoom right in and you haven't got anything else in the way, it makes it a little bit easier to see. But at a fairly decent zoom level, it does make things a little bit tricky. But again, that's just me sort of splitting hairs. It's a minor little fault. There are a few little AI issues with things like the gardeners and the janitors. I do notice sometimes they'll get stuck on one particular patch for ages. You often find that you get little bottlenecks like this where you've got members of staff waiting to move through a door that can't be opened because all of your officers are busy performing a shakedown and stuff like that. But again, I think part of it is due to my my poor planning and poor management of my prison, and I think part of it might be just due to pathfinding. So I can't really blame the developers for that one. It's mainly my own incompetence, I think. But as for the sound, isn't much in the game in the way of music outside what I've heard in the tutorial, but the sound effects are quite good. Mainly it's just atmospheric. You hear things like the showers, you hear jail doors opening and closing. You do hear a lot of shouting and screaming and things if people start to fight, and you may hear the occasional riot kicking off, but for the majority of the time everything is fairly quiet with just some atmospheric sounds. Now the game has recently been heavily discounted on Steam during the summer sale, and it happens from time to time when the game actually goes down in price. I believe the full price for the game is actually £19.99 UK, which I assume is about $25, something like that. I'm not too sure what the regional equivalent is if you're in the States. What I can say is, even in its current state as an early access game, and I have no idea why these guys are in here, because they shouldn't be, we want to search this prisoner, and we also want to search this prisoner. We also want to go ahead with our deployment and make these areas staff only, because we shouldn't be getting prisoners going into them. Oh, look, and this guy's been found with a fork on him. I would definitely recommend anyone who is interested in these simulation style games to check out Prison Architect. Even at its full price, it is worth every penny. It isn't finished yet, that is certainly true, and you may be one of those people that wants to wait until a game is finished before you play it. I can't blame you for that, and I'm not going to blame you for that. But what I will say is, the current state of the game is very, very good. I haven't had any crashes, I haven't had any stability issues, I haven't had any performance issues with it. It has been a lot of fun, and speaking to other people that have also spent some time with it and played a lot of it, the consensus seems to be the same between everybody, that there's a lot to do in the game even though it isn't finished, and it just runs really, really well. I'm still interested to see what else the developers can add and see just how much more extra content they can squeeze in before they release the game. It's certainly doing well in terms of updates. It gets updates very regularly, so they're always adding new stuff to the game. They're always bug fixing and making little tweaks here and there. I know a lot of people have concerns with games in early access that are under development, because sometimes they're under development for an awfully long time and it feels like they've been abandoned. But Introversion have certainly been doing a very, very good job of rolling out regular updates for this game. So I've actually, sometimes I'm a little bit dubious to recommend certain games to people, because I sort of think, well, you know, I do have a little bit of reputation to uphold, and I don't want to sort of say to someone, I'll go and get this game because it's really good, and it turns out to be a complete flop. But I have absolutely no hesitation at all to recommend Prison Architect, because I think it is an absolutely brilliant game. It did come under a little bit of fire in the news recently, mainly because, of course, you know what it's like. Whenever a video game does something the slightest little bit controversial, the media gets up in arms about it. And I think there was a lot of complaint about the actual subject matter, that it may be trivializing prison life. But as one of the developers actually said, first of all, it's just subject matter, it's content, and it's something that hasn't been done before. But these are real things that go on. Prisons do exist. Prisons do have managers. They do have budgets. And everything that goes on within this simulation of a prison are things that do go on within real prisons. All of the prisoners' needs have to be catered for. The staff have to be trained and cared for and maintained. You have to make sure that the prisoners are comfortable and happy. That at the end of the day, they may have committed a crime, but they still have human rights. They're still entitled to live somewhere with certain amenities and be comfortable and be warm and have food and water and things like that. And you have to make sure that you are able to provide all of these things, while at the same time trying to keep order in the prison and trying to keep a profit going. So I actually agree with the developer. I don't think it's... well, it might be a little bit controversial in the fact that it is something that hasn't really been done before, but I certainly don't think there's anything wrong with the subject matter. Yes, there is a little bit of humour in the game, the way that it's stylized, the way that some of the things are done. The first time you ever see a prisoner who's drunk, just sort of staggering backwards and forwards up and down the corridors, and this little guy down here, Daycock, I've actually seen him staggering backwards and forwards all the way to the psychologist's office for his behavioural therapy. And it is quite hilarious to see things like that sometimes. But when you've got the other side of the coin, where you've got prisoners fighting each other, killing guards, killing guard dogs, trying to escape, and you start to realise that, you know, in real prisons there are guards that maybe don't get paid all that well, and sometimes their life can be in real danger doing this job. So I certainly don't think the game trivialises the subject matter. If anything, I think it actually brings some of it to light, but it tries to do it in a light and entertaining way. And I think that is perfectly fine. But this is Prison Architect, a game that is still currently in early access by Introversion Software. Go ahead and check it out. I thoroughly recommend it. It is a really, really enjoyable simulation and management game. I've been Unstable Voltage. Thanks a lot for watching. I'll see you guys on the next video. Until then, goodbye for now.